Gateway to March Field. One of the oldest Air Force installations in America, March had its origins in World War I as our nation reacted to the enemy threat with a rapid military buildup. Perhaps the training then arranged for 5 March Field Aero Squadron inductees looked something like this. Drill and more drill, soon to be no longer recruits, but Army men marching proudly. Here, Army Air Service men prepare bomb moldings. Cadets trained in gunnery, drew equipment for flight, and planned for any and all eventualities. And here's what it's all about, as flyers approach their JN-4 aircraft and ready them for flight. Anticipation of what is to come seems in evidence as the intrepid cadets ready themselves for their mission. Then, taxiing out before too much dust flies, they lift off for another training flight. Here, flyers perfect their bombing. March Field flyers did not see combat in World War I, but these wartime sequences could still prove interesting. Technology has advanced somewhat, as you can see, but the thrill of air combat will never change, especially when one is victorious. March Field closed down in 1923 for 4 years. Perhaps the most famous incident to occur following reopening of the field in 1927 was the refueling of the Question Mark in January 1929. The Question Mark, a Fokker C-2A from March Field, took off from California's Van Nuys Airport and stayed aloft for nearly 1 week. Following the unprecedented flight, the Question Mark landed at Van Nuys Airport. All concerned appeared happy to receive congratulations following their record-shattering flight. The Question Mark crew included Sergeant Roy Ho, Lieutenant E.R. Quesada, Lieutenant Harry Halverson, Captain Ira Aker, and pilot Major Carl Toohey Spots. From 1927 to 1931, March Field served as an aviation training facility, making flyers out of young cadets during 4 months of primary training. Highlight for each class, naturally, was the graduation, because the training was extremely difficult. Here, Major Millard F. Harmon presents well-earned diplomas to cadet graduates. With the toughest part of their training behind them, cadets could look forward to further training at Kelly Field, Texas. This sequence shows some of March Field's B-3A Keystones over the Grand Canyon in the early 1930s. During 1932, March Field was visited by Governor Rolfe of California. At a wing review in his honor, the governor saw the Keystone bombers and smaller P-6 and P-12 pursuit aircraft on the flight line, witnessed the P-6 and P-12 taking off, then returning in a sweep over the field. Then in came some Keystone bomber crews for their impressive flyby. Here is Lieutenant Colonel H.H. Arnold with the governor, watching the remainder of the 1st Bomb Wing's Keystones as they swoop in low over March's flight line, perhaps signaling the end of an era, as single-wing B-10 bombers would join the Air Corps inventory that same year. Governor Rolfe expresses his appreciation to host Lieutenant Colonel Arnold. The PB-2A and A-17 attack aircraft shown taxiing were a common sight here in the mid to late 1930s. So were the B-10 bombers depicted here taxiing out and taking off from March Field. Here come the A-17 attack aircraft again. This sequence shows A-17s in line on the March Field flight line during the latter part of the 1930s. The A-17, along with the P-26 Pea Shooter, was March Field's primary attack aircraft of the 1930s. The Martin B-10 bomber was heralded as the air power wonder of its day. It was the first all-metal single-wing bomber to be produced in quantity. This sequence shows B-10 bombers from March Field over Southern California in the early 1930s. March Field B-10s and B-12s were replaced in the late 30s by B-18 Bolo bombers, shown here staging a mock attack on New York City. With B-10 aircraft supporting the attack are Boeing P-26 pea shooters. These aircraft marked a transition from the liquid-cooled, fabric-covered biplane to the air-cooled, metal-skinned monoplane, the first pursuit to be equipped with wing flaps. Since the A-17 with the P-26 played such a key role in our history, the A-17 is shown again, this time in battle formation over Southern California. These A-17s belong to March's 17th Attack Group, commanded at one time by Captain Monk Hunter, a highly decorated World War I ace. P-36 aircraft were also part of March Field's illustrious past. Capable of flying at speeds in excess of 300 miles per hour, the P-36 had a range of 680 miles. Here, pilots from March Field peel off in the skies over Southern California during training operations in the late 1930s. Numerous famous Hollywood personalities visited March Field before and during World War II. In 1940, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy appeared here and were well received. From July to December 1941, March was the testing site for the B-19 bomber, then the largest bomber in the world. This aircraft, the only one ever made, was test flown for some 43 hours, but never went into production because it could not carry a payload commensurate with its size and total weight of 53 tons. During 1944, 26 Women Air Force Service pilots, WASPs, were assigned to March Field. They flew the AT-6 aircraft, towed aerial targets for gunnery practice, worked in the control tower, and even pumped gas. The 22nd Bomb Wing's predecessor, the 22nd Bomb Group, came to March Field in 1949. However, during World War II, its members flew B-24, B-25, and B-26 aircraft in the Southwest Pacific Theater. Here, Bomb Group B-25 Mitchell crews dropped their ordnance on enemy positions while pouring cannon fire from the nose. The outbreak of war in Korea in 1950 offered another challenge for the 22nd Bomb Group, this time involving B-29 aircraft and crews from March Field. The B-29 was capable of 357 miles per hour speeds and had a range of 3,250 miles, and could deliver 20,000 pounds of bombs on enemy targets. In July 1950, the 22nd Bomb Group deployed to Okinawa for combat duty and flew its first strike against enemy forces in North Korea just 9 days later. By the end of October 1950, all significant targets for heavy bombers had been destroyed, and the 22nd redeployed to March Field. In August 1951, General Hoyt Vandenberg, Air Force Chief of Staff, came to March Field to present a posthumous Medal of Honor to the family of Major Louis Sabille, killed the year before when diving his damaged F-51 aircraft into a concentration of enemy armored vehicles near Hamcheong, Korea. March men and women passed in review, and F-86 fighters saluted the fallen hero with an impressive flyby demonstration. Here, General Vandenberg poses with Major Sabille's wife and son before national media from the Los Angeles area. This sequence represents an important era in March Field history, the B-47 Stratojet being refueled by the KC-97 propeller-driven tanker. This great record-setting team was the mainstay of March Field's operational force from 1953 to 1963. A particularly memorable ceremony took place in January 1957 when Major General Archie Old Jr. returned to March Field with 3 B-52 crews following a record-setting around-the-world flight. General Curtis LeMay, Commander-in-Chief of the Strategic Air Command, was present to congratulate the crews following the milestone flight led by General Old, then 15th Air Force commander. The crews, in what was known as Operation Power Flight, flew around the world in 45 hours and 19 minutes, thereby almost cutting in half the previous world record of 90 hours. It was a proud moment for crews and families on the ramp area. As General Old put it years later, it was a heck of a good training flight, which helped demonstrate SAC's long-range capability. Naturally, crew members look forward to returning to their loved ones. As the next few sequences show, this is the time to alert you to look soon for General LeMay's aide-de-camp as the medals are awarded. The aide is then Lieutenant Colonel David C. Jones, now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Colonel Jones can be seen several times. What is of most interest, however, is the fact that he served as commander of the 22nd Aerial Refueling Squadron at March Field during the early 1950s. At the time, according to a former member of his KC-97 squadron, Colonel Jones believed in spit and polish. For example, he required his flight crew to wear white shoelaces with their flight boots, a practice normally reserved for air policemen of the period. The time for which all waited soon came as General LeMay, with his aide's assistance, presented distinguished flying crosses to each B-52 crew member of the historic globe circling mission. It was a time for quiet reflection, a time for individual and family pride as the record stood until March 1980. Which brings our story to more modern times, to the era of the B-52 bomber and KC-135 tanker, today the mission aircraft of the 22nd Bomb Wing at March Field. This sequence depicts a routine day in the lives of wing crew members as they execute a precision mid-air refueling somewhere over the western part of the United States. The war in Vietnam, as seen through the eyes of this fighter gun camera film, offered the 22nd Bomb Wing an opportunity to excel by performing in combat what it had constantly practiced. Vietnam was to be the third war in which the wing participated, and the fourth for which March Field flyers had prepared. The first bombing raid by a wing stratofortress was launched in November 1966. After that, the 22nd participated in many more bombing missions during partial deployments. When the entire wing deployed to Guam in March 1967, things began to really get rough for the enemy. Working around the clock for 6 months, each crew on a single sortie dropped 70,000 pounds of conventional bombs on the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, with an accuracy of 99.6%. Wing crews flew more than 3,000 missions and dropped more than 300,000 pounds of 500 and 750-pound bombs. The B-52 was acknowledged by captured enemy prisoners at the time to be the weapon system they feared most. Perhaps this post-strike film showing damage done helps portray the devastating effect of a rain of bombs from high altitude. You will note some transformation in the terrain as seen by the craters and rearranged jungle canopy. The enemy could not hear the bombers coming. One instant, they would be feeling safe and secure. The next instant, most would be dead or wounded in a cataclysmic upheaval. The B-52 was America's greatest psychological weapon of the war because it struck terror into the enemy who had no way of combating its terrible and swift effect. Crews from March Field would be called on many more times during the remainder of the Vietnam War. Yet no challenge was as great as that offered by the Linebacker II bombing operation over Hanoi, North Vietnam in December 1972. 4 March B-52 flyers were killed and 5 were made prisoners of war during these high-risk raids. Following the 27 January 1973 ceasefire in Southeast Asia, the Air Force Regional Hospital here was one site selected to care for returning POWs. So 52 of them came to March Field upon release in April 1973. Among them were the 5 B-52 crew members the 22nd Bomb Wing had lost over Hanoi. It was a joyous reunion on the flight line. While America rejoiced at this homecoming, the return marked one further example of March Field's involvement with historic events. One of the returning POWs was Captain Peter Camarota, a wing B-52 crewman. Captain Camarota's return, along with that of the other 4 wing flyers, helped make the homecoming more meaningful for Marchfield members. The story of Marchfield is a never-ending one, because realizing that the past is indeed prologue, we continue to revere these traditions so as to motivate present and future generations of Marchfield men and women to even greater achievements.